All right, OpsTalks watchers, welcome to this week's episode. I gotta admit, I'm pretty excited about this week's episode because when we were talking about who would we have on for OpsTalks, there was 5 people that came into my head, and this gentleman who we're going to be talking to in a minute is one of those folk. He's been in the PropTech space for 10 years, but he's really built a company from the ground up. He has always been a consummate gentleman, and I would say, and I don't use this word lightly, but a thought leader in our space because he's been really from the ground up building a product that didn't really get a lot of recognition 10 years ago. It was sort of a gap in the marketplace, and he's really made a name for himself in the space, and honestly, just a great guy. In general, super gregarious, and I've really seen his brand evolve in the past 10 years, and I'm super proud of what he's accomplished. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Ray Hespen, CEO of Property Meld. Ray, welcome to OpsTalks.
Well, thank you so much. And this is the part where there's a background sound effect of like everybody cheering.
Exactly.
If you guys could throw that in, that'd be great.
That's going to go in the post edit. Exactly, you got it.
Thank you. So, Andre, thanks for having me. I can't believe that you put me in the crowds of, other podcast hosts you've had, like Joe Rogan and the President of the United States and stuff. I'm glad I made the top 5. But no, I'm jesting.
You got it.
I'm kidding. Super excited to be here. And I always jest, I was very appreciative of getting the invite. I always joke that Rentley's the big brother in our industry, in our space, just because you guys also kind of came in a little early when nobody was asking for the solution yet. And eventually you were just like, but this is the right way to do it. So I'm super thrilled to be here and picked up on this. So thanks so much.
No, thank you so much, Ray. I appreciate those kind words. And yeah, it's been a pleasure seeing you guys grow through the years. I did a little background research on you. And of course, we've seen each other at the shows, and I know you, and I see a lot of the content that you post online. By the way, very active LinkedIn influencer. I got to commend you, man. You're really good at those live streaming videos. One of the things I wanted to touch on is you're from South Dakota.
Wyoming, technically.
But you're in South Dakota now. You run a successful PropTech, and I understand your background is it mining engineering?
That's it. I'll even go back a little bit further. I grew up one of 5 kids, grew up in Wyoming, and I actually was a more blue-collar worker. So I worked in the oil field. I've been framer. I had my own roofing company for a little bit. I actually moved out of my parents' house a little bit before high school because I thought I knew everything. My poor parents. There was no stopping me.
I think every high schooler thinks that way, right?
But I acted on it, which is the unfortunate part. So I was wholly convinced I was going to just work in the oil field. And one day we go to the mall because I'm broke, and my parents said they would take me, and we'd had enough wounds healed, and they said they'd buy me clothes for high school. And I'm like, well, heck yeah, like I'm broke. At the mall, which we had to drive 2 hours to get to, by the way, there was a great exhibit put on by the local engineering school that was showing all the engineering stuff. And I'd shown some interest in that. And my dad, as soon as he saw me, he saw the window of, wait, there might be a way that you're not in the oil field the whole life, and which there's nothing wrong with it. Both my brothers are still in it. They make great money, hard workers. But anyways, I got really interested in it, and I was a little bit of a geek as a kid. And so that's how I got into engineering. And I was going to go become a mechanical engineer. I'm good at math. And I had one guy, when I was going, he said, you should become mining. They get paid better. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's how I became a mining engineer, by the way. All within the span of about a year, I went from getting ready to just have a blue collar job, which nothing wrong with. Great incomes that are made there, and I have huge respect for there, to going to engineering school and to becoming a mining engineer. And so that was my journey of the selection path.
So did you graduated in mining, and then what did you do after school?
So for those that are in upper 30s or beyond, remember the beautiful saga of 0809 in the real estate industry. So the trickle down impacts of that is construction materials. So when I was graduating, I was in construction materials, particularly cement manufacturing, the glue that holds roads and concrete walls together. And anyways, I graduated fortunately enough to have a job. Like, I already had one lined up, but boy, it was a hard market. There was layoffs left and right.
Oh, I remember that period. It was tough all over, man. It was, I think, 15% unemployment rate in LA when I was trying to get a job. So understood. I remember brutal. The struggle. Yeah.
And so the beautiful thing was, so I still went and did cement manufacturing, but I tell people it was a gift all the time. Like, sometimes the challenges are gifts and you don't realize it, right? I show up on site. There's supposed to be two people's job. Turned out those two people's jobs being converted to one person's job. And guess who that person is? Me. It's like, welcome. You thought you were walking in, but you're actually doing both these people's job. But the beautiful element of that is after I got over my little pity party of hardness and difficultness of the role, I ended up getting half decently good at solving problems where under constrained resources, you had to still deliver outcomes. And I used a lot of things around automation, technology, process improvements. And I ended up doing that for the plant I was at. I went to a place in California, did some of that there, Chicago. And my last professional job, I'll throw air quotes, had to do a turnaround in Baltimore, Maryland, where they had lost their local raw materials, and we had to figure out how to get fixed costs down by, I think it was 40%. And they had just laid off half the team, and this was before I got there, and then the leader quit and I got dropped in. So I got a major, awesome master's level, MBA on optimization through going through one of the most challenging times, and I'm very thankful for it. But that was at that point is when I started having a conversation with my now co-founder, about solving another problem. But yeah, I did mining and operations for about 6-7 years.
So you had basically a track record of being thrown into situations and having to problem solve on the fly, it sounds like.
I think God gives everybody gifts, admittedly, and I think I was given just that particular one. I'm able to, and same reason I was half decent in engineering is because I liked and I enjoyed root cause analysis, of what the root issue was. And if you can go find ways to streamline, that and really have, first principle thinking about how it should be done, it's actually kind of a game. The other thing that I think was part of, and if you want to go to the background a little bit, it's getting people to believe in it and communicate out what we're doing. And I also very much enjoy that. I enjoy a hard problem, and I enjoy getting to link arms with team members and go shoulder to shoulder and go do something hard. I think there's probably nothing more rewarding in life for a dopamine hit at the end quite like that. I don't know where I got some of them, but I think those were the two things that I really enjoyed. And then if you enjoy it, you're willing to put in hours and tolerate the mess and all that sort of stuff.
Before we go too deep, we didn't really explain to the audience Property Meld. What problem does it solve for?
Yeah, great question. So I'll just tell you the origin story. It'll be super fast. My co-founder was at a rental, and he had about 3 or 4 maintenance issues at his property. And one day he called me up. He says, "Dude, this is terrible." As a renter. And I moved around a lot, kind of mentioned that.
Yep.
And I said, "Yeah, I'm actually handy enough. I just didn't bother most of the time. I just fixed it. It wasn't worth the headache for me." And then we ended up, doing kind of a process map diagram. And I talked to a bunch of property managers. We said, man, we can automate a lot of these things, create more visibility, make it a better experience. And so we started the company in 2015, I believe. And our big thing is, what has evolved in what started as, solving the maintenance experience. We've really evolved into how do you optimize NOI through maintenance, which means running a great property maintenance operations, means creating great experience for residents, minimizing cost and maximizing margins. And we've got a platform that services over 750,000 rental units in the US and Canada.
Congrats.
Thank you. And we process, over $1 billion worth of repair a year. In terms of work facilitated. And so, yeah, we're pretty excited about it.
What's your ideal customer profile for your company? Are you targeting single family, multifamily, SMB, mid-market, institutional, or just, hey, you pay me, I'll do it? There's an operation style that is definitely our bread and butter. If you work with residents and there's somebody performing maintenance, that is an ideal customer profile. We tend to not work with anybody that's managing lower than 100 units in their portfolio, but we go up to as large as 40,000 and beyond. And so our big thing is we started in single family, but over the last few years we've really had a lot of multifamily, really lean into maintenance and how do we optimize that. So they make up about 35% of our books multifamily, 65% single family. And tell me, when you and your co-founder, what's your co-founder's name?
David Kingman.
So you and David pulls you in. He says, "Look, man, I need your help with this problem." At what point did you and David say, "Oh my God, we can sell this"? What was that light bulb moment?
So I always tell people, like, even though I'm the CEO, I'm not the idea guy. Like, I just recognize good ideas. And so when he actually told me that one, I got curious, and I remember calling property management companies. I probably called like 25 of them. And I remember, like, I don't have any, I remember my like script. I don't have anything to sell you, by the way. I'm just really curious about maintenance process. We're thinking about building something.
That was your line.
That was my line. Oddly,
it was the counter sale line. You said, I'm not here to sell you. I'm here to learn.
Yeah. And you can imagine maintenance coordinators sitting there going, wait, somebody wants to talk to me about my brain and it's not a complaint.
Yeah.
It was really, really easy. And actually, I actually keep this. I don't know if it's a prop or I just am too lazy to put it away. But we ended up building a business plan. This is the original, by the way.
You still have it. That's the original business plan.
Same alligator clip, everything.
Wow.
But, thank you. Yeah. This is going in the museum. But this is what we built. And the moment I had enough research to build the process flow or the mess of the process flow of in all the directions maintenance could go, and we answered the question, property managers not only hated it, but you could assign a pretty significant monetary value to it. That's when we knew we had a business that we could go get something done.
So by conducting these, we'll call them interviews, you were able to process map out, hey, this is the current state of affairs for maintenance requests. I'm sure as you added every triangle, you said, man, here's an opportunity. As that sheet got bigger, you're like, oh, here, this is juicy. There's an opportunity to optimize here.
I think so. Like doing that was important, but actually highlighting where they went wrong and broke. And then highlighting how many of those components are human interactions that could be automated. That culmination. So if you take a look at that, you'd notice they were color coded. And that's why. The moment you sat there and looked like this is where it goes off the rails. Oh, also, these are all the places where the human being doesn't have to be involved, nor do they want to be involved. Then you sat there and you could quantify costs and opportunities. So it was when you did the color coding.
Yep.
Is when you're sitting there going like, okay, can technology do this?
Right.
Co-founder's like, pretty sure. Yeah, well, I'll quit my job.
So you quit and you just went into this full time when you thought you guys had something.
Burn the boats. Yeah. So admittedly, I bankrolled part of the company to start. I didn't have that much money, but he quit before me. And then I made a commitment at no point I was going to let him be the only jobless one living in, the financial squalor of being an entrepreneur. And so there was a day I ended up quitting alongside him and I'm like, okay, I'm full time now. Like,
wow.
Better make this work. And we didn't even have a product yet fully to sell, but I was committed to the cause with him. He was brave enough to quit and I was going to keep my word on quitting as well.
Wow.
So, yeah.
See, like I said at the top. Trustworthy guy. I knew it. I knew it. So let me ask you, I think, anyone who's built a business knows, one of the biggest challenges landing your first customer.
Oh.
Do you remember your first customer that you landed?
The only thing I don't know is the exact phone number I dialed, but I can tell you her name. I know what city she lives in. I know what accounting system she was operating. I knew how many doors she was operating at the time. I know everything about that one. And if the first one is hard, it's the first 10 though. It's the first 10. But if you actually want to know my big advocacy for being in person and with team members doing hard things, and we've got an office here, we've got some remote team members, but I always advocate as much as I can being around people. I remember being so cool on that call. I had a Motorola Razr. I can tell you everything.
Please.
It was a Motorola Razr. It wasn't the flip. It was that when they had the touch screen. I had the earbuds in my ear and I remember walking through and I was so cool, calm, and collect that I got a credit card, had it entered, all that sort of stuff. And the transaction had went through. And when you check your phone about 3 or 4 times to ensure it is hung up.
Yes.
Because I was not going to let that person know that how big of a moment was for me. And I hung up and there were some explicitives in there. That preceded a yeah, and I was fist pumping in the air, and I was alone, which sucked.
Right.
I called my co-founder, but you just in that moment, I want to jump and bear hug somebody, and I was alone in that moment, which was climatic while anticlimactic at the same time. But yes, I very much remember my first sale for sure.
What do you think inspired that customer to take that leap of faith with you?
They believed I knew about their problem really well. Preceding that one phone call, and like one of the core values of Property Meld, we call it, loyalty. And I think a lot of people would be like, oh, just take care of the customer. But the thing that we did, just same as we did the process mapping, is we said the customer's not always right, but their problem was always real. Anytime we did interviews, they'd say, well, I just wish there was a box here, a check box. It had nothing to do with the process changes, right? And so the thing that I got through the hundreds of conversations that I had before, I was very inquisitive, asking questions. But when I got to that person, I would like to think they felt like I knew their problems to equal as they did. And there was something that I was sitting on that was special.
Right.
And by that identification of I get your problems with you, I think that's what actually was the transfer of trust that says, you know what? They at least know my problem really well. They say they've got a solution for me, it's always, you hated to hear, well, how many people use you?
Right.
I can't lie. Listen, we're early in beta. It's a very limited customer set that we're even approaching with this.
So limited, it's 0.
How many people use you?
I know. Everything you just said, check those boxes in my head. The hanging up thing I still do, by the way. If I'm ever with the client, me and Merrick have this tick where we're like, are you off the phone? Are you sure? Well, we're going to do a little bit of inception. Ray Hespen and Property Meld have a subject matter expertise in solving operational problems for the maintenance operations of real estate operators. You are now the CEO of Property Meld, and you've seen it grow through 10 years of rapid growth, cross-vertical selling. You've gone into multifamily. What has been, as a CEO, the biggest operational challenge that you've had to fix at Property Meld?
So when we started, there's an element where you're just trying to solve a narrow set of problems. And then your job as like CEO is to constantly understand where it's eventually going to go. And there's almost this constant movement of taking what we're learning, validating, and then getting the entire organization aligned from it. And so I'll tell you, one of the perfect examples of it is our job is to not build a cool tool for people to use. Our job is now to create statistically better NOI performance on operations, making perfect decisions. And so the problem that I'll often have is like when we find some of these moments where like, oh my goodness, what we thought we were is not what we are today, getting the entire organization aligned around that new thing. And right now we're running into we're peeling through maintenance renewal data right now. We've actually got maintenance behaviors that are impacting lease lengths, and we're sitting on it. Very granular level stuff. And so we're sitting here going, wait, so we can kind of predict lease churn, or we know how to not create lease churn environments?
Oh, that makes sense. So you're seeing a correlation between maintenance request and retention of a resident.
Insanely. And insanely nuanced. So we're sitting there looking at that. We've got access to a lot of information around the resource out in the market. Our customers have access to understand their vendors' lead time, technicians' lead time, what they're good at, what they're not, cost, spend, all that stuff. And then we're also getting very good at understanding margin. And so we've been this company that's just like, make maintenance better. And that's what we need to do. And we need to take that. But now we're sitting there going around, how do we make operators make perfect decisions? Got a lot of new tools with AI, obviously, data, information thing that we're learning. So it's almost every so often where you hit an inflection point of identification. Do people understand what we're trying to do here is not build software. It's actually to make perfect decisions and make sure that they go through. And so those are really challenging because it's not a forget everything but you've got to get, and the larger the organization gets, the more you have to just say it out loud and contextualize and create success metrics and everything else, where it's like everybody's got to get reoriented, or else if you got half the battleship trying to turn the rudder this way and half the battleship trying to turn the rudder that way, you ain't going to go anywhere. So it's probably one of the things that it's constantly doing. And just because of the rate of innovation, I think you have to be really good at that.
And it's almost like an organizational mindset change in a way of how you look at the product, right? And they're not unrelated, right? It's you can still have the best and greatest experience, but if you tie it to, this is why you should care, operator, because the data shows that if a resident has 3 maintenance requests within a 9-month period, they are 50% more likely to churn.
Yeah.
And how much does it cost you to get a new resident versus just maintain an existing one? That's, I would say, as an operator, less sexy, right? Because everyone wants to improve the experience. I don't think anyone will question that. But it almost ties it back to a budgetary, hey, this is on top of a better experience, why you should like really care too at the bottom line level.
Well, if you actually were to like go into something, a lot of people probably, if you've ever seen the movie Moneyball, or even
I have
pay attention to the NBA.
Okay. I don't, but let's go.
Let's go that way. So in the NBA, they do these like pictures of like where everybody shoots from, right? Like they, you know, if you've ever seen a graphic where they shoot the ball from. If you were to look 20 years ago versus today, you'll notice something where nobody shoots in between the paint, i.e. the little painted box in the center, and the three-point line. Nobody shoots it anymore. Why? It's because mathematicians got in there and they said, that's really dumb. It's not worth the risk. And they condition the entire teams to do that so they maximize their chance of winning. They did the same thing in baseball.
Interesting.
So it becomes more of a math game where you combine the human beings, but they should perform the things that are mathematically intelligent so they can win more games. And so if you think about, you know, a sports game as being entertaining, right? But the goal is to win. Maintenance is the most exciting. It's like job in property management. And I say that like, you know, it's painful, it's firefighting, it's whatever, and we're saying let's make it winning,
right?
And so that's the weird, interesting shift. And I would say our job is to make it sexy and fun, to go from a state of chaos to a state of order and a state of perfect decisions. And that's why we do little dumb things in our application where we put little brains on things and be like, do you know why you should do that? It's because of this, that, and that, and that. And we sit there and bring a sexiness to perfect decisions. And it's actually, you know, without kind of spoiling too much,
sure.
I was going to drop a little video on here. I think our industry is going to look a lot different even in a year from now. The moment you can turn NOI with a lever using maintenance, it'll be very, very interesting what happens.
So Ray, I mean, you touch so many maintenance requests. You look at the data all day. You're obviously, you know, you have the engineering background. You have the data-driven mindset. Do you have a little data nugget that you can spread upon the audience, those listeners that are reading, like what does Ray Hespen see?
Yeah.
And
so
maintenance requests, NOI, like what's a nugget that you want to put on the audience?
I'll give you a perfect example. These are fun ones, but there is a correlation to speed of repair and resident sat very clearly. But that's a very broad brush approach. Without giving too much, because we're going to try and build some of that into our AI decision making. But there is a certain type of repair that you only get once a year before you drastically increase your lease churn. Towel bars are inconsequential to lease length. But do you know what isn't? Anytime a resident has an issue with a pool, whether it's single family or multifamily, your ability to get that rectified quickly in a satisfactory manner is crazy important.
Really? The pool is critical.
The pool is critical. There's a lot of things that aren't. There's a lot of, you know, it's kind of like an inbox, right? Like there's some emails that are really important and there's some that aren't. And there's some you can respond to 10 days from now. And there's some that you should respond. And it's like there's starting to become a little perfect map that says which ones are which. And I'll give you another one. Not in multifamily, you don't tend to see this, but water softeners. Nobody cares if they're done quickly, but they always care that it's done satisfactory the first time.
Well, my wife could have told you that, Ray, because every time I forget the salt pellets at Home Depot, she's on me. She's like, did you remember the water softener? So water softener and pool.
Water softener and pool. Towel bars are less important.
Not so much.
Forget them. Hang some of those 3M clips on the wall. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that.
So you have a good sense of, you know, what maintenance requests matter, particularly tying to retention. There's obviously a level of sophistication on the implementation of your technology. But at the end of the day, someone on the ground has to use it and make sure they're using it well. How do you ensure that, right? Because it's not an easy job. And I mean, I can tell you as someone who works a lot on site with leasing staff with our technology, a lot of what we do is make sure we implement and educate.
First of all, I would say everybody's got a problem that can immediately go away and they can see go away. If I was to say, well, you need to look for AI perfect decisions in dispatch and that's going to optimize this, and nobody's going to search for that. It's like, oh my goodness, can you help me solve communication gaps? I'm really having a problem and it's creating issues. Or can you help me with follow-up with my team? Or I don't know what's happening. I'm having really bad resident experience. Or I'm having really hard time controlling costs. Like, we have to build a software that can solve some of those problems out the gate. Now, the thing that took us a very long time, and this is the same hubris that I try to ensure our own company does not go after.
Yeah.
It took us realistically 8 years to get vendors to systemically enjoy using the software. You're talking about the trades where the median age of a plumber is 55. There is tons of nuance in being able to make that happen. Now, the term property meld, if you actually break word the term meld, and the reason like why, the little roadmap thing, the term meld actually means to combine. We knew sometimes an investor's input is required. A resident, a technician, a vendor, a property manager, and the idea is to actually meld those moments together where needed. And so you actually have to get all stakeholders participating insanely well for it to be magical. And so we've spent tons of time. Our vendor NPS is insanely good right now. And that's the game. You have to figure out how to do that. And so it took a long time. That's where you get the piss kicked out of you and somebody leaves because somebody's not using it. You find those friction points and you keep sanding down for perpetually. So that's the foundation. You've got to have human beings that not are always technology savvy, finding amazing value in what they're doing with that technology, or else it all falls apart.
And so it sounds like you're really hawkish on net promoter score, measuring that and just seeing what refinements you could make to improve that at all 4 levels of the user, right? Whether it's an investor, a vendor, a resident, whoever.
Quantitatively, yes. Qualitatively, handing somebody the phone and telling them to do something without any instruction is the best qualitative.
Right.
Here you go, father-in-law.
Go use it.
I want you to submit a maintenance request.
Yep.
I'm not going to tell you to do anything.
Yeah. No, 100%. Another question for you too is, where do you see applications of generative AI, and you sort of alluded to it, really enhancing just the industry as a whole and maintenance as well? What's your AI vision as it applies to maintenance? Without giving away too much, obviously we're not saying spill your roadmap, right? But tell us how you see it evolving and the adoption.
So we acquired a company that utilizes AI to say intake and triage, and creates an amazing resident experience of helping them solve some of their own problems at home, remedy stuff, or even collect enough information for a single trip repair.
And that was Mezzo? You recently acquired Mezzo, right?
Yep.
Congrats.
Yep. Thank you. Great team, phenomenal product. I mean, insane. But I think there's a lot of buzziness around AI, and you have to find a way to separate the chaff from the wheat. There's obvious wins that are incredible, right? Language, communication, reading, digesting information, long form into short form. Everyone can become a master communicator, communicate with different languages very easily, and you can find ways to use that. Where I think, and what we've kind of put as our stance on, AI, we had a conversation, probably 6-9 months ago on what's going to be our strategy in relation to what is capable of AI, at least today, is going to be around perfect decisions. I kind of referenced that, but real estate's a human being job, and I don't think that's going to go away. When something breaks, I want to feel heard by somebody. And there's always going to be a technician or vendor come knocking at the door. I don't think the robots are coming yet. And so perfect decisions, and this is another great application of AI, is taking tons of information and solving mathematical statistical problems to help people make informed decisions. And so a lot of the way that we think about it is, if I'm getting ready to dispatch something, if I'm running it for every 1,000 units, I have 400 decisions to make a month on who do I give work to, 4,800 decisions a year, who to give work to for every 1,000 units. That if you can have, what is this little AI agent or a ton of little AI agents running around scraping up information that's happening out in the real world, utilizing our data and helping you say, hey, you know who you should give this to based on the fact that that resident is a potential lease churn risk, the fact that the resident SAT score of that vendor or that technician and the lead time of that repair and what is statistically likely to make them happy. you should think about this one. And so I think that's where, we're going to see a lot of shorter term progress is helping people make perfect decisions. It is going to be a human business. I don't think that's going to go away. So having one person become a lot more of a powerhouse in NOI delivery, I think is going to be where we see a lot of that.
And as a founder, do you buy or do you build? What was the decision tree that Ray had where he said, look, I want to do this thing and I could build it, or I could just make an acquisition? What was going through you and your team's head when you were sort of going through that decision tree, and what inspired the acquisition?
So 10 years gives you a lot of lens, and the amount of companies that I've seen like, hey, we're just going to build what Property Meld's going to build. And, we're 4 or 5 years in and, maybe they have the same size team or smaller. I'm like, okay, good luck.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pain in those moments. There's things that are particularly nuanced that are incredibly and you take Mezzo, for example, we acquired that. It's like for every 1,000 units, that conversation is going to happen 350 times a month. The difference of being 5% better is actually pretty massive when you look at it on an annual basis. And so when we were looking at that one, the technology was so impressive. It's by far better than anything in the market. It's retail grade. We could go out and kick this into the market and give it to standard homeowners. I mean, it's so good. And so we had to measure against how important is that grade of product, assuming they have found all the corpses and bodies and all the tripwires and everything in there,
right,
to get it to where it's at today, and measure it against, all right, what do we think we can do? And now let's triple it based on some of those other factors. Again, I've seen a lot of people attempt to build Property Meld. They usually tend to end up in the same place. And we try to make sure that we're not making those same dumb decisions as doing it. But obviously, there's monetary involved. And, as a co-founder always says, is you can do anything with enough time and money.
I want to shift gears a little bit. You have an office in South Dakota. You guys have a headquarters there. I'll ask you 2 questions. One is, how do you think about people culture? Right? What shapes your, would you say, corporate culture at Property Meld? That's part one. And then the second part of the question is, being in South Dakota, and to give everyone in the audience context, Rentley is based in California. We have a couple offices, Camarillo, LA. One of the things I always kind of think about is remote and in-person and recruiting, and sort of the advantages and disadvantages. You being in South Dakota, you must have a really interesting and unique perspective on recruiting and just, people talent. How do you think about those 2 questions? And again, the first is the culture, right? And the second is how do you curate that talent being in an area which, just to be candid, isn't, you're not in the Bay Area, right? It's not known as
it's not known.
Right.
It's Silicon Prairie, by the way. We're getting it branded that way.
Silicon Prairie. Are you trademarking that? Is that an OpsTalks first? Silicon Prairie?
You could trademark it all you want. Somebody else could. It's who actually gets it done. Is ultimately going to hang on to the title.
So is Ray getting it done? Are you the biggest PropTech company in South Dakota?
PropTech.
Yes.
Yeah, PropTech for sure. PropTech for sure.
What about tech? Would you say in your top 5?
No.
We got to get you there.
There's some other ones.
We'll get you there though.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Okay.
But I would say there's an element to, in software, in technology, I would say in startup, and we still consider ourselves startup because we're trying to break through some things that just haven't been done before, and you just have to have a very weird stomach. One of the things that I know is critical or really important is your ability to garner speed of trust. And there's a lot of physiological studies and different things, but if I'm to say, and I heard this analogy, right? If we got a screen in front of us, it's kind of like 2 dogs that are, on opposite sides of a fence. We can bark at each other all day and think we're the worst and whatever.
Right.
And then we're thrown out in the lawn and able to interact and be like, okay, maybe I like you, whatever I do. Trust is the permission to punch people in the nose or punch ideas, and they realize it's not personal. It's about we're trying to solve a problem very quickly. And so I'm a very big fan of the power of being able to learn from osmosis, being able to hear something, pick up on something. There's value there. Trust building, being able to, after a really hard day or a hard week, going out to grab a bite or grab a drink. That stuff really accelerates the push. Now, that being said, there's roles that we can't. There's some brilliant people out there that we can't bring locally.
Right.
We advocate for, we try and get them here. And there's almost kind of a capability percentage cutoff that I have in my head that is hey, if I can't find 70% of that person locally or get them here 70%, then we'll recruit elsewhere. The nice thing is, though, my co-founder's remote, and so product and engineering has a little bit more of a heads down sort of a thing, and maybe benefits from limited interaction while developing. And so it's been really good to have a co-founder that's really helped foster and enable that. Well, I've been advocating for getting all of us together. So I'm very much a big advocate of it. I've just seen this happen. There are really hard times in software and tech. I mean, I think the industry's feeling a ton of it right now. Being able to go faster is such an advantage to survive.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely go faster when you're working together. So we try to have a bias towards that.
It's often people misquote Darwin. I don't know if you know this. A lot of people say that Darwin's saying is the strongest survive. It's actually not true. If you really look at it, it's the one that's quickest to adapt to its environment is the one that survives, if you think about it. And so that's a good story point for you guys that you're basically actioning on is, you're right. It's not always the strongest or the biggest or the baddest. It's the one that can adapt the most to the marketplace, the condition, the technology.
Yeah. And I think there's an element, if you were to take it down to whatever, when we started, I tried hiring remote salespeople, and especially when you're trying to figure things out, being able to listen to each other and hear each other's pitches, for example.
Yeah.
And being able to go, oh, I like that. I'm going to do that. Oh, you did something different. I like that. The speed of iteration is just so much faster in proximity. It's unreal.
My God, I was making this point in a previous podcast, but one of the best things about when we started Rently was being on that sales floor and hearing everyone's sort of pitches and how they position the product, and having that sort of environment where people would iterate, listen to each other, challenge each other, give each other real-time feedback was so special. I remember it was a hallmark of achievement if you said something on a call and then other people started copying it.
Yeah.
I remember I in the early days, I would make because I sat next to Rachel Paperno. I still remember her. She was a closer. She was a beast. And she sat right next to me. And I almost wonder if they did that on purpose to send me a message like, hey, you better close as good as she does. Doesn't matter who you are. And so they sat me next to her. And I remember my first customer too. And I remember making the call. And I remember I was trying to make a point about our security. And I said, trust but verify, almost like you would your own children. Something along those lines. By the way, I didn't have children back then. So I don't know what the hell I was talking about,
you were going.
But I said that line to kind of anchor the fact that, yeah, you should trust the prospects going through the system, but you should verify their identity by using a credential on file, blah, 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 blah. Because they were challenging why you had a credit card on file. And I said that line, the kids line. And by the way, this is a room full of 20-year-olds. No one had a kid. And I swear the next day, everyone was saying, yeah, you got to trust but verify like your own children. And I walked out of that office so proud that day. But it kind of touches on your point is you're right. It's like those moments, those special moments that you can't always replicate remote. And it's so critical, particularly when you're starting something new.
Yeah. When you get a little more mature, everyone understands their job to be done, the widgets to turn, what your role defines success. It starts making it a lot easier. But it is really hard when there's not a script handed to you and said, this works. This has worked for the last 10 years. Figure it out.
Right.
In onboarding, here's every objection you're going to come up and here's all the answers. In customer success, when these scenarios happen, here's how you do this.
Yeah.
And until you get to that point, like that is a superpower. And especially in this, technology environment, speed is everything. To take your Darwin quote, it's super important.
You got to be agile. You got to think on the fly. You got to adapt. 2 more questions. And man, has this time flown by? It almost feels like we'll need a part 2, Ray. But, being a founder, I'm sure you work long hours, right? It's not a normative schedule. How do you feel like your family or your foundational network or your brothers and sisters, anyone, like how has that supported your endeavors?
One sick truth that I've realized is I think a big lie that was told when you're younger, and it's this concept of retiring, is this thing that you eventually get at the end as if it's some sort of victory and reward. I remember when I was in the cement business, I would watch people that would work at a cement plant for 45 years. They would complain every day. They would tell you how many days they had left. They could give it to you the hours by the end, how many hours left they had to work.
Yep.
And you get to watch them in their retirement party, and they would leave, and they were so happy. But then they had to leave the gate, and they knew they couldn't come back. Or maybe they could. And you got to watch that moment. And then the second thing that you watch is they would come back.
Yeah.
They would come and check on their friends. How are you doing? They would complain about the thing. And it's like, you're doing this for free now. And then the last thing that I saw one time, I was at a really, really old plant. It was in Fredonia, Kansas. They had this thing where it showed how long these people worked, like, the leaderboard of who worked here the longest. And then they had a thing right afterwards that would show what the year they died. So it was year to start, year end, the year they died. And the thing that I would notice in the cement business, it's not easy work. Like, this is not.
It's
like
probably
it's
very physically exhausting. Yeah, I assume.
I would watch people work their entire lives, and then you'd see that cross symbol that they'd die like a year afterwards or 2 years.
After they retired?
After they retired. And after working with enough people, I've realized that's a lie. So you are actually living in the best. It may not always feel like it, but you're living in the best. And everybody I've talked to that has had very successful endeavors will remind me that, I'm actually jealous of you. You don't believe it, but it is. And so I accept that truth. So I don't talk to my kids as work is a bad thing. I talk to them as I'm fortunate to get to do what I do, because I want them to know that it is meaningful, and a big part of their identity is going to be the value they provide through the world is going to be through the work that they do. And then the second thing is I look at my time, because you hear all these things about, I wish I would have spent more time here. I wish I would have spent more time there. And time is such a fickle enemy. And so the thing that I look at is I just put my time on a barometer in relation to how my kids are being raised. And I look if they're good people, if they believe in God, and they know how to work hard. So those three things, if I feel like they're on that path, I can keep doing what I'm doing. If I feel like there's a deviation, I need to come and invest more. That's how I measure my barometer. So I can continue to invest more if I feel like they're on the right track, because my goal as a parent is to, raise good kids that do those three things. So it's kind of how I've approached it.
You said two themes that we've had on several OpsTalks, which is make sure that your work is meaningful, which it sounds like you feel that way. You really believe it, which is fantastic. We had Paul Spinella from Kwikset on, and I asked him the question, what guides you on your day-to-day? Without skipping a beat, he said, it's real simple. It's faith, family, and fitness. My 3S. So sounds like you guys share a lot in common, which is fantastic. There's a lot of themes that I feel like keep coming back in OpsTalks, which is fantastic.
You get to see some good patterns. So as you're identifying them, I think it's important to call them out and be like, hey, that little thing that's an inkling, I hear it all the time.
And what's funny? We're going to launch a chat GPT module of success. It's just going to tell you, hey, here are all the OpsTalks episodes. This is how you become successful, as mentioned by all these successful people. So we're doing the same thing that Property Meld's doing.
Love it.
Last question. This is, you get 30 seconds to pitch anything you want, Ray, or tell us anything that you want about Property Meld, to yourself. Any words of wisdom? It's your time. Close us out there, Ray.
Thanks, by the way. I didn't realize I'd be doing, but I'm going to go to the thing that I think is probably one of the most exciting. We have an annual conference that's dedicated just maintenance. Whether you're a Property Meld customer or not, we brought in last year 400 people.
Nice.
This has been a conference that has doubled every year.
Awesome.
And the maintenance profession has been wildly underserved. And so if you come out to South Rapid City, September 16th through the 18th, it's a maintenance conference. It's everything from executives or learning thought leadership stuff around maintenance and other operators to tactical training of best practices to perform maintenance on the day-to-day. So we have people that fly in VAs. We also have execs that come in. But it's a great, fun time. There's a reason we double every year. It's because people come back.
Nice.
So check us out. mxsummit.co is a great place to learn more. And we actually got Sharon Lecter, who's the co-author of Rich Dad Poor Dad this year. So we're pretty excited about that.
Fantastic. So the MX Summit in September, Rapid City, South Dakota. Be there, be square. Meet Ray Hespen in the flesh. And you know what? I might have to get out there, Ray. I might have to just pay you a visit. I've never been to South Dakota, and as a homage to you being on OpsTalks, I think I'll have to return the favor.
Oh, open invite.
Open invite.
I cook a top 5 global steak. So,
all right.
That's the trade-off.
So I'll get a steak from Ray Hespen
You'll get
himself.
a steak. You'll
Sold.
get a steak.
You're on,
Okay.
my brother.
All right.
Ray, thank you so much for being a part of this. Really appreciate you sharing your story. I know you're so busy, so really appreciate you. And that's this week's Ops Talks, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you got to learn a lot from our friend and founder of Property Meld, Ray Hespen. Appreciate you guys. Like, subscribe. See you next time. Take care. Bye-bye now.